Hi guys, just before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to ask you a big favor. Assuming you like the content that I'm putting out on this channel, could you please do me a favor and press the subscribe button? It really does help reach more people. And while you're at it, if you could just smash that like button down there, we'd really appreciate it. I just want to get this channel out to as many people as possible, so more and more people are getting exposed to these kinds of stories. And I'll stop talking now and let you get into the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback Podcast. In this episode today, I am really excited to have both Heather and Kent McKean. So in terms of Heather's, we'll be talking initially about Heather's story, but it's going to be really interesting having Kent on to talk about, this story from his perspective. We often talk about partners and what they have to go through and their role in this, and they play such a huge role in this. So it's going to be really interesting to talk about that. In terms of Heather, her passion is helping people find freedom from trauma, pain, illness, and addiction. After finding herself near death and diagnosed with multiple rare genetic diseases in 2012, she realized that she needed to deal with the real cause of her chronic illnesses and discovered that all her past traumas were subconsciously supporting her illnesses. Through the same techniques that she now uses to help her clients, Heather not only healed from a myriad of supposedly incurable chronic diseases, but began living the life of her dreams with Kent. So I am super excited to hear about this technique and, how in which you help your clients as well. But if we could, first of all, how are you both? I've been talking solidly for a couple of minutes.
Doing great.
We're good. We're in Maui. Never be sad in Maui.
Wow. Okay. How long are you there for?
We live here, but we're traveling the US right now, actually in an RV.
Wow.
Right. So you happen to catch us while we're back in Maui. We were just here doing a private retreat for some clients and another couple podcasts and interviews and everything while we were here. So we leave in a few days back to RV, but this is where we live.
Amazing. How much of the US are you looking to travel, or is it specific areas?
The whole lot of it. So we left to do the RV trip in
a few months ago.
I don't even remember. I think September. We've seen 17 states, I think, thus far.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of driving.
It's a lot. It's fun though. It's all good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we can touch upon that in a bit, but in terms of your story, Heather, could you go back to, I guess, before you started to get any sort of health issues? What was life like before then? Did you have health issues growing up? Were there always signs there? Could you talk us through a little bit about that?
For sure. So it's interesting. Had you asked me that same question when I was in my 20s, I would have said, no, I was always like pretty healthy. But your norm, the norm that you grow up with, isn't always a universal norm. I mean, it's your norm, it's our norm, but it was. So looking back, when I really started to get well and go on my journey of my health, looking back, I realized no, I actually had a lot of issues growing up. Was constantly, and you know what, kids get sick, it's good, it helps build our immune system at various times. But I did measles, mumps, I did strep throat constantly, tonsillitis. I started at 12, I started doing intestinal infections and issues around that, was hospitalized for that. I mean, pneumonia, everything. It just after another. Had a pretty major appendicitis when I was in high school. Appendix ruptured, had a lot of issues around that. So once I started looking back, I realized, but I had a lot of my family members were sick all the time. So it really did feel normal. I thought that this is what people did. I thought everybody kept antibiotics in their medicine cabinet that you would just take, whenever you started not feeling well. I really thought that people had very involved relationships with their doctors and with medicine. And I thought that was normal until I realized it wasn't. So I wouldn't have said I was a sickly kid. I did a lot of stuff, adventured a lot. But I did have a lot of stuff looking back. So that was I would say that's probably the beginning of it. When I got into my 20s and left home, really I joined the Army when I was 18. So I kind of left home at that point, and did start to have some health issues surface that were different when I went into the military. But when I got out and then knew I was leaving home kind of for good, is when stuff really started to exacerbate.
And yeah. So could you take us through? So what was it specifically, do you think, that started to exacerbate things?
Well, at the time I wouldn't have known. I can tell you now.
Yeah.
So much of our health is a physical manifestation of what's happening on the inside of us. I had what I think people would consider a traumatic past. There was a lot of physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, things that, again, unfortunately, were a bit considered a norm in my family. But it was a lot, there was a lot going on in my childhood. And because though I chose to deal with that stuff as a young person, my coping mechanism was to be the strong one, the responsible one. I felt I took a lot of care of my mother. She was an addict. My father was, did a lot of that stuff too. They had divorced. There was a lot of we were from one addictive situation, drugs, alcohol, to another, to another, to another. So my way of coping with that was kind of just being the strong one and trying to mother my mother, care for my brother. And through that, I felt like I was very well adjusted to my past, to my trauma. I could talk about it very easily. I would share very openly about it, but hadn't dealt with it. I didn't really know how to do very many emotions. What I would know now, I was very dissociated out of my body. I was very much of a doer. Let's just get things organized and do. And that was my coping skill. Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing is when I left home, I moved to California in a little car from the Midwest and to start my life. And though being away from kind of toxic environments and familial things was good, it also started to, when you can't just keep doing that with people, it started stuff started to come up, let's say. I had no idea how to handle it. I wouldn't have even said there was stuff coming up because I was a coper and I was a copeaholic. My addiction was coping, working, doing. And so, which is such a preferable addiction as far as society goes, but it's no less devastating to the body and to the mind. So once I moved, I started having, one of the first things that started happening was I was having a lot of accidents. Seems random, but I can see now it wasn't. I fell through 10 feet through a window into a bathtub and busted up my face, my neck, my shoulder. That led to all of this recovery through mainstream medicine. This put me on a route of painkillers, muscle relaxers, and of anti-inflammatories. And my body just started having all of these different things to the point where I woke up one morning completely paralyzed on the right side of my body and frozen shoulder, issues in my neck, started this roller coaster of surgeries. And I mean, the doctor was like, here's these painkillers, take as many as you need for the pain. And they never touched the pain. I started having a lot of spinal issues. So then that led to me having some issues with painkillers, which was really scary for me considering coming from an addiction history. But nothing worked. Nothing worked. Then I started to, so I was having so much neck, back, shoulder issues, constant pain. Just, there was never any relief from the pain. After that, I started menstrually bleeding 9 months straight, 9 months, no stop. I started throwing up, was throwing up every morning. I would pass out, just randomly pass out while I was driving, pass out. And so I started doing the doctor, going from doctor to doctor, really just at that point, collecting diagnoses. Chronic fatigue was one of the first that I got. So when I went in for this injury, I was having neurological issues, and they said that I had the spine of a 70-year-old, that I had something called degenerative disc disease, which is supposed to be genetic, that I had the no cartilage along my cervical and my thoracic spine, so that I was going to be having issues for the rest of my life. I had been a horse trainer previously, and they said I could never ride horses again, that one right fall would cause me to be paralyzed. So these are the things that I'm just collecting. Then I get this diagnosis of endometriosis, which follows numerous surgeries for that. They're saying maybe I would never get pregnant. So I went from chronic fatigue to endometriosis to all of this degenerative disc disease, spinal stuff, to then fibromyalgia, to then, just going on and on and on. And then I just kept having accidents. Well, probably because I didn't stop riding horses. And so I just kept having accidents. Ended up having a fall that I've broken so many bones that it just, you wouldn't believe it. This arm 3 times, this arm twice, my legs, so many different things. Then I took a big fall, got flown, life flighted in. I had brain swelling. So all of this stuff, continuing. I ended up getting married throughout this whole process, which this is an interesting story that I think we can catch back on about what pulled us together, I think initially, because I was a bit of a health case. And we didn't know until later, until we both started healing in a lot of ways, that he was actually really drawn to that for different subconscious reasons. So let's see. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh goodness. IBS. I got, IBS. Oh, then celiac disease was a big one. I got diagnosed with celiac disease. So started eating gluten-free, but it caused a myriad of gut issues. Fast forward a little bit, got married, had a hard time having children, a lot of infertility issues. So that I collected a bunch more diagnoses around the infertility and different stuff that we were doing. I did finally get pregnant, took a ton of injections and protocols to keep me pregnant. Then I had my first child, had my second child, and then all the stuff really kicked up a notch. I was nearly incapacitated. Here I have 2 little children. My back issues started to go so much, like the back stuff. I started having surgeries at 9. When my youngest was 3 months old, I had my first spinal fusion. So I had the vertebrae in the spine fused. They told me I would have limited to no range of motion because the vertebrae below and the vertebrae above were also shot. They said blown. I would have to have those fused. So I was supposed to have no range of motion. I had ankylosing spondylosis. I never say that right, but that diagnosis where then I would start my, neck would start to inch forward because of the lack of stability in the spine.
Well, and then all the Lyme stuff came up, right? So it was like, what's going on?
So then we moved to Northern Virginia, which is like the Lyme capital of, I feel like, the world, it seems like. So was surrounded by a lot of people who were seeing my chronic debilitation, the fatigue, just so much stuff coming up. And they were all like, you need to go get checked for Lyme. You need to go get checked for Lyme. They took me to the showing of Under Your Skin, which as a Limey you've probably seen,
Yeah.
which I was like, oh my goodness, this is probably it. So found a Lyme literate doctor. And then if I wasn't in a health crisis before that and had such a wonderful amount of diseases to add to my list, that was the biggest rabbit hole I have ever gone down in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll fast forward from that, a year into having a Lyme literate doctor, I had all the things. She said I had the most Babesia, forms of Babesia and co-infections that she's ever seen in her life. Then I had some form of malaria from Africa. I'd never been to Africa. I was all the thyroid, hyperthyroid, was developing a goiter, Graves' disease, and Hashimoto's, which are you can't do both of those, but somehow my body was doing both. Diagnosis, I had them. It was all there in the tests. Then I had rheumatoid arthritis, so I was on injections for that. So I had to be seen by an infectious disease doctor because of this rare form of malaria that I was doing in my body, active tuberculosis in my body. POTS was the next one. So I had a Lyme doctor, a rheumatologist, an infectious disease doctor, a cardiologist for the POTS, and my spinal surgeon practically on speed dial. As I started treating for Lyme, I was going in for IV infusions biweekly, was getting blood drawn weekly, because at one time when I was at my worst, I was on 180 medications and tinctures and injections. If I counted up, so anyone who's done chronic Lyme for any amount of times knows the amount of pills that this involves, or drops or whatever. And as I spread them all out and counted out, it was a full-time job for me to stay on all of the medications that I was on for all of these diseases that I had been diagnosed with. And I know if any of your viewers are out there like, this is not possible, it did not seem possible. My medical records were like, the stack that I even kept were this high. And the blood work and the x-rays and the MRIs and every test under the sun, with the proof that I had all these things and was doing all of these things. So I'm 180 when I counted up everything that I took in one day, 180 things. Very quickly went into liver and kidney failure. So I'm at home on an IV drip. Really, we are now considering what was going to happen after I died. I mean, I couldn't walk. My back was so bad, couldn't walk. I had to be carried in agonizing pain. I would scream just to be carried to the bathroom. Mind you, I have 2 small children at the time. I was, just thinking I was going to die, planning to die. And then realizing like, I actually didn't want to die. Now, in the midst of all of this, of course, the mental, when you go through chronic illness, you get into the mental side of that too. So antidepressants. At 16, I was diagnosed bipolar, though manic depressive. So I'd been on antidepressants on and off since I was 16, which is another familial thing that we do in my family. So lots of stuff happening mentally, physically, just at the end of the line. And then a doctor who came to my house, I was having house calls by the doctors at this point. I was so sick to even try to travel, mentioned that possibly, he was at his wit's end too. He was really invested in trying to get me well, as most doctors were, I really believe. And he said, have you ever considered tapping? And I was like, I don't even know what that is, but I'm willing to try everything. And that started my journey on the mind-body connection. A few people over the years had said, do you think that your past has anything to do with this? And I would just say, no, how could it? I don't think so. But for me inside, so victimized in my mentality, I was like, but of course, all bad things happen to me. So the only thing my past had to do with this is that all bad things happened to me. Like every bad thing that could happen will happen to me. So, I mean, that's as much as my past had to do with it, I thought. So the tapping was the first that I started to realize maybe my body was holding some of that stuff, some of that trauma. And that was really the beginning of my health journey and the end of my chronic, disease journey. So, and of course I can go into all of that, but
there's not many stories that I have on this podcast where I'm like constantly just going like that. Like, yeah, wow. Over what period of time was it when you first started getting symptoms to the point where you started doing tapping? Like, how long was that?
So, I mean, if I was to say my first like chronic diagnosis would have been probably chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yeah.
Really close to the endometriosis. So I started, and of course, as we just discussed, that wasn't really the beginning of my health issues, but that was the first time I started collecting diagnosis. So we're talking about
10 years.
It was probably 1999 that I got that, 98, maybe that first diagnosis I got. Yeah. To when I was at home on the IV drip was 2012.
Yeah.
And just bringing you into the story, Kent, like when did you guys meet in this point?
Yeah, we met in 2003. So we met, 5 years into her, constantly having something going on. And I, as Heather mentioned, very subconsciously, but I was very drawn to her. Now, not just because of the sick stuff, obviously. I mean, drawn to her wildness, her beauty, to who she is. But there was something. And I remember a conversation with my mom when I was like, Mom, I think I found my girl. Like, this is the one. And one of the things that I mentioned was that she's got, a number of health issues. And my mom had mentioned, are you sure that you want to go, if she has all these health issues, like, are you sure this is who you want to be going towards? And obviously her being older, she was like, listen, I've known a lot of people who deal with a partner who have chronic health stuff. And for me, I'm just like, no, everything's great. But the thing is I said, no, I always have dreamed of being able to take care of a woman, was this, and again, I didn't know what that meant at the time, but there was something in me that was like, ooh, I can take care of her. Little did I know what that actually meant. And so I was drawn to, no, that's okay that she's got health issues. I'm strong. I'm here. Now, what Heather was mentioning earlier is some of my subconscious programming was deep down. I didn't even recognize this, but deep down, I think I felt really weak and incapable in so many different ways. And so here's a woman who really needs help. Mm-hmm. And so I could easily step up to the plate without feeling threatened, without feeling less than, and so there was this, she, of course, in her subconscious programming, of course, we knew this way later on, was like, I just want someone to take care of me and to be there for me and to be the strong one. And here I was swooping in saying, that's me. I can be that. And so our puzzle pieces fit perfectly. And as we'll probably talk about in a little bit, they fit perfectly in a very disorderly, unhealthy world with us. So yeah, that was our beginning. I'm like, oh great, I can take care of you. And then,
we didn't know any of that until later,
stuff,
but yeah.
So because we've never had someone on the show that's been a partner, and we talk about it a lot. And I think sometimes partners have been the most important thing for that person getting better, and then other times that partner just couldn't stick around because it just it wasn't right for them and it wasn't right for the person. And there's such a burden in monetary, physically, but definitely emotionally for this person, because I think sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, when you're the person that's going through it, you desperately want that person to understand, but they just can't fully understand because they're not living it. Heather, did you ever feel that frustration I guess not just Kent, but like other people just couldn't understand it because you weren't going through it. And then Kent, did you also feel frustrated that you couldn't quite get it, like because you weren't actually feeling it?
Good questions.
Yeah, I definitely felt that constantly. But I was one of those people too who kind of tried to hide the sickness. Yeah. So on with most people, I would be like, no, I'm so strong and I'm fine. And then the people closest to me knew and saw how sick that I was. But I wanted people to understand without them knowing all the details, like how much I was fighting, how much I was trying, how hard it was for me. But then honestly, that mimicked my childhood so intimately, because through abuse, through the stuff that was going on in my family, I wanted people, so I felt like nobody else is going through this. Nobody else is suffering like this. No one knows what it's like to be raised in this, and I just kept thinking at the same time where like something's wrong, but I need to protect. Nobody can know what's happening in my family, but I wanted somebody to know. Man, did my body play that out hardcore in the illness later on in life. So for sure, I felt that.
Yeah.
I wanted people to know, but didn't want people to know.
Yeah. And then
I wanted the care. I wanted that default, like almost like pass, if you will, though I would have never said that. I work hard. I'm strong. Like I never want someone to give me what I didn't deserve. But the fact of the matter is I didn't really know that I deserved very much.
Well, you didn't think you did.
I didn't think I did. So it was this, and I was very unaware of anything that was happening up here to that level. I was so dissociated that I wouldn't have been able to know that stuff when I was sick. And how many people doctors told me all of this was in my head in the beginning, where I like nearly knocked someone out to say that, especially in the first Lyme diagnosis, the old kind of curmudgeon-y doctor was like, chronic Lyme doesn't exist, da 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 da. But he's like, I'll bleed you if you want me to bleed you. And I was like, he's like, it's all in their heads anyway. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wanted to punch him out. But of course, that's the kind of doctor I would have found in that place where I was.
Yeah.
And it just that in your head thing where I need to say this so carefully, especially in the chronically ill community. Come to find out, it was all in my head, but it was really happening in my body too. That's the thing. Yeah. It didn't mean all of that stuff wasn't happening, but the source of why it was happening was stored here. It was stored here. And for very good reason, it was doing all of the stuff here. Yeah. But yeah, for sure, that was something I wanted people to know and then didn't want people to know at the same time. I wanted people to see how hard I was fighting, but didn't want anyone to think I was weak.
Yeah, I get that. I completely get it. Which is why I stopped. I made a promise to myself I wasn't going to like complain or moan about something, because I realized the reason I was doing it, I wanted to get some validation. The minute I got that validation, I was just like, oh, I don't like this. I don't like this. This is
right.
Reject this. And it's just this weird, unfulfilling cycle that you can never be happy with. But Ken, so how about you? Just going back to my question on from your perspective, was it super frustrating from your side that you couldn't, because you can never fully understand? Did you just desperately want to, but you couldn't as much as you would like to?
I think that there was part of me that really wanted to understand. I think most of me just wanted her to get well, and I felt like I was there to support. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I felt like I was in it for the long haul, however long that took. I think that there was a big part of me that was kind of numb to, is she going to actually get well? I just kind of was living and being there for her. I think on a deeper level, the reason behind me sticking around, because there are a lot of people that are like, I'm not going to deal with this, I'm out of here. one of the reasons that I stuck around, and obviously one being just that I love her and I'm there, and no matter what, we're in this together, but also kind of goes back to that whole thing of I think I felt deep down unconsciously broken. And so, hey, here's someone who's more messed up than me, like really. And hey, I can actually be there. I can step up to the plate for this one. And so look what I'm doing. Look what I can do. And I think that was honestly a way to validate my own life and myself and my worth, is that I am worth something because I'm here for you. Again, totally subconscious. And this came out way later when we started really diving into the mind, body, and how this all works. But for me, I do believe part of my sticking around was a survival of myself.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So going back to when you, for those who not aware of tapping, is that like emotional freedom technique? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
started there.
That's where I started. So he told me tapping. I looked up tapping. I found the tapping solution, which is the Ortner's, which is EFT, emotional freedom technique. Yeah. So I'm looking into this and I'm like, okay, so they're saying that I've trapped energy in my body from things that have happened. And I was like, okay, I mean, all right, I can believe that. And then they were like, so I'm like, okay, so tell me what do I do about that? And it's like, okay, so you know, this pain, this pain, this pain, this pain, this pain, this pain, even though I have this problem. And I was like, wait, I have to do that for everything that's ever happened to me? Oh my gosh, I'm going to die sick. I was like, this is it. I'm like, this is not going to work. So, but it did open my mind a little bit to this. So I didn't do anything with traditional EFT, actually. But I went into something that was similar to it as a last ditch effort, you know, to kind of, and I had no idea what I was really getting into. But through that, something was said. So everyone asks me, what was it that got you well, that you think got you well? So
and they're looking for like, what was the technique? What was the thing?
Yes. So this is it. This is the big pinnacle of everything. But it really was. And that's why my method is called mind change, because this was the moment that my mind changed, not just like, oh, I think this, I think that, like something in me shifted. Because what was said was basically this idea that we are responsible for this stuff, that these diseases are created in our minds. They're done by our body, but for the reasons that are stored in our mind. Like our body's just the messenger. And so I created all of this stuff in my body. And this is where something shifted in me, because had you told me that before, the way I would have heard that before would have been just another kick in the face.
It's your fault.
It's my fault.
Yeah.
And it would have been something that I couldn't have heard. For some reason, I think because I was near death, like literally we got my affairs in order. That's no small thing when you have 2 little children. And, you know, I think I was just finally at that point where I heard this in the way it was meant to be heard, which is, I am doing this. These aren't things I have. They're things that I'm doing. And if I'm doing this incredible amount of diseases, ones I've never heard of, malaria from Africa that I had never been to at the point, something shifted to the point where I was like, instead of me looking down on myself and being so victimized about that, which I would normally do, beat myself up, I was like, oh, I'm amazing. If I've created all of these diseases within my body, if that's true, I'm a stinking rock star, because I didn't know anybody who was doing it as good as I was doing it. And it just something shifted. And then the next thought was, oh my gosh, if I can create this myriad of diseases, I can do something so much better. Like if I really have that power, I have the power to do anything. I have the power to do anything. That was it. And I know that that's I know had I heard this story, even at that point, I've been like, no, that's too easy, or that wouldn't really work. But I'm here to tell you, I can look back and say that's when my healing started. And as crazy as it sounds, I feel like that's the point where I was healed. Now it took a while for my body to catch up. Not that long though. I can tell you from that point on, 3 months later, I had titrated with the agreeance and the help of my cardiologist, my Lyme doctors, all of these people. I had titrated off of all of these medicines. I was on no medicines 3 months later.
Mm-hmm.
And I was starting to get into the gym and starting to live my life. So in 3 months from that shift of my mind, that mind change moment, my body had caught up almost completely.
So, wow, first of all. Second of all, is that, did you have to, so you've had this epiphany, and I guess people do have epiphanies, right? And they're quite often, maybe they have them on a particularly good day, but then the next day something knocks their confidence and they're back to where they started. Was it okay, well, I've had this epiphany, but now I need to consistently stop myself and work on that? And were you using a technique to do that, or was it just you just had this one moment and that was it?
Oh no, I worked my butt off from that point on.
Yeah.
And dealing with the trauma. That was the idea that I had gotten from this, because it was a mix of EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and some NLP and some other stuff. The idea behind it was that we needed to deal with our past. We needed to deal with the memories. We needed to deal with what was happening in our mind. And that so much of that stuff was subconscious. So consciously it could be like, I don't really think that I have that much stuff, but holy cow, when you get in and you access the subconscious mind, there's stuff there. So at that point I was using the tools that I had. And that was it, but I was doing it daily. I was working on it daily from that point on. But what had shifted in my mind was, it was really that piece that I was doing it. So if I wasn't feeling well, or I was seeing some sort of symptom flare or whatever, I was realizing I was doing it and I had a reason for doing it. And I would go in and deal with that. So I'll give you a little example. I got home really believing I was well from that point. I had gone to this thing and then I came back, right? I was like, no, I'm well. So 2 weeks after that, I had my big year appointment with my cardiologist for the POTS, right? So I was in there all the time for the basic stuff and for the tests and for this, but once a year I'd have to go in and do this massive workup. Like it was a 3-hour appointment. So I had that appointment. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm well. Like I'm going to go in and tell that doctor, I'm not taking all of these medications anymore. So I go in and you do this initial thing. The first thing they do is they hook you up to the EKG, and you sit with one of the nurses and they go through your stuff and they do your first reading and whatever. So I'm in there, I walk through the door and I'm like confident. I'm like, I'm well. I can't wait to tell this doctor I'm not taking this stuff anymore. And so they hook me up to the EKG, and I'm familiar enough with this stuff now that I'm watching the EKG and I'm like, look at you, I'm doing so good. So then the nurse starts reading my file and about how severe of a case that I was. And boy, they get into it with you, and he's going through this stuff. And I kid you not, Phil, at that point, my EKG starts doing things. And I was like, wait a minute. No, I'm in control here. And so I told him to I didn't say to shut up, but I was like, hold on. I was like, stop for a second. I was like, I need to get this back under control. And so he's like, wait, what are you talking about? What are you doing? Because then at this point, when my EKG starts doing the thing, he's looking at it and he's like, oh yeah, see, such a bad, and I was like, no. So I stopped and I started going using some of the techniques that I had at the time. And I literally brought things down again. He's going, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, almost like I needed to stop what I was doing because I was affecting the EKG. But I did get it back down again. And he was mind blown. And he's like, what did you just do? And I was like, I did this thing and this is what I need to talk to the doctor about because I'm well and I don't need to. So I say all that to say, that's the thing. When I realized I could make symptoms happen, I could also make them not happen. And I could bring them back into control. And it was this huge thing that started from that point on. So fun secret that when you have to go through this entire battery of tests to finally get in to see the doctor. But I finally got in to see the doctor, the cardiologist, he's like a world famous cardiologist in Northern Virginia, that I was like, so I'm well. And let me tell you, and I went through this whole thing, partially thinking he's going to think I'm crazy. But the most amazing thing happened. He literally goes like this. So I'm a part of a secret society and he's like, I believe what you're saying. We believe that the mind is the body is controlled by the mind. And he's like, I don't tell anybody this, but I believe you. And I think you can do this. And he starts looking through my stuff. And he's like, now your body is so far behind. He's like, you need to get your body caught up. But I believe since your mind is well, that you can do this and I'll help you. I was like, dang, let's do it. Okay, this is the kind of doctor.
Well, it's so funny. It's so funny that you were saying earlier you attracted that kind of doctor that was matching your frequency, your energy at that point, and then at the time where you need and your energy is vibrating at a level where you need that kind of doctor. The universe delivers.
Yes, I haven't. Okay, so then my Lyme doctor at this point, when I had to go in and be like, I'm not coming in anymore, I'm well, and they were like, okay. But I was so well, you become like
a different person.
These doctors, though, become so intimately involved in our lives. It's almost like this weird enmeshment, right? You know them so well. Mm-hmm. So I literally got so well that they started sending me the clients or the patients that they were like, we've done everything we can do. You need to go see Heather. I started seeing these chronic Lyme patients using my techniques and stuff. And then they started getting well to the point where I was going to their houses because they were too ill to come out of the house. Right. And I started going to their houses. So this isn't just me. Many of the worst case scenario in chronically ill clients from this particular practice started utilizing the techniques that I was using and teaching and doing at the time and got well too. It wasn't just me. So it was amazing. And the doctors, that's what a tiny bit restored my faith in these. I was like, they actually do want people to get well. They just don't know how. Mm-hmm. They just don't know how.
So with this, is it kind of, so we've had quite a lot of guests and I'm trying to convince my listeners that I'm not seeking brain retrainers out. It just so happens that this is how people are getting better. And actually this is something that people need to pay big attention to, including myself. So it's a kind of brain retraining. Is that what it is? Like the techniques that you're using, is that what it is?
Sort of. So I know that so here's the thing. When I started out with some of these mind-body connection things, and I went through and I used the tools that I had and they were great at the time. Mm-hmm. But I started to realize when my clientele stretched and the other practitioners in these modalities, I realized we were hitting a wall. Mm. Some of them would, relapse with certain areas and stuff. But I was like, with me, it worked. Why did it work? And why was some of my clients did this work?
And then why didn't this, it work? That, or that modality not work? And this worked. And with that person, why?
Right. Because you'll talk to people and they're like, I did EMDR and it changed my life. I did DNRS and it changed my life. I did EFT and it changed my life. NLP and it changed my life. But then you've got other people like, I tried that and it didn't work for me. This got me so interested. So I pulled back for a while and became a brain researcher. That's what I did. I dove into the brain research and the neurology behind it and the quantum side of it too, right? With Dispenza's stuff and everything. So my unique ability to step back and be not intimately attached to any one of these modalities, that's where I got to see where the connection was. So do we retrain the brain? I wouldn't say we even retrain it, we rewire it.
Yeah.
but we rewire it because I'm just going to give you the secret right here. It's in my book too. So I'm not trying to hide anything. I want everyone to know this. We store memory. Every experience we have is stored in our subconscious mind. That's how we take in information, but it's taken in through one of your 6 representational systems, or multiple at one time. We visually see it, we hear it, or we know it, right? Which is audio digital. And so, or we feel it, which is kinesthetic. So, or we can sometimes smell or taste, and that's part of how we establish memory. Now, those memories, they are actually written in and stored and encoded in our brain. They then form neuroclusters, which form neuropathways. 95%
or more
of all of our actions, reactions, behaviors, and automatic way that we are on a daily basis is our subconscious mind. And the way that we output anything, the way we see the world, and we don't realize that we're even doing it, is from the file folders of our subconscious mind that just open up. They take a quick history of everything that we've ever seen and experienced, and then they output. When you have traumatic experiences, when you have belief systems that seem normal to you because that's the way you were raised, but are not serving you in the way that they, like, I'm not good enough, I have to work for love, I'm broken,
no one understands,
yeah. Like, bad things happen to me, all of these different things, those are supported by experiences in your life. You have proof. But if we MRI in, these are neuropathways that are written.
Physiological neuropathways. It's not like, not just a thought, but it is a thought.
It becomes a thought, but it's based on the wiring of our brain. Yeah. So then when our brain is trying to help us with this stuff, trying to let us know there's a incongruency, we don't listen. We're not taught to listen to that stuff. Most of us don't know at all how to engage in our subconscious mind, which is not a bad thing. The subconscious mind is very protective, if you will, because it runs your temperature of your body. It runs your breathing. It runs your digestion. If you can just get in and fiddle with it whenever you feel like it, we would not be functional humans. It runs our autonomic nervous system, which is our safety. So, but that's what also runs and dictates what we feel and how we think and what our emotions are. We don't listen. Most of us don't know how to process emotions. So it does manifest in our bodies. And it's our belief in the mind change method that physical illness or dis-ease in the body is simply an incongruency in what's happening in our mind. And sometimes it's real, like I always say, you're doing it for a very good reason.
Well, and I'll add that, often we think, oh, my knees, they're always hurting, and my knees are against me, my back's against me, my health, this thing.
My body's against me.
And it's not. Your body is actually, if you really understand the science behind how the brain works in conjunction with the body, whenever your body is doing some disease or doing something, it's actually for you. It's speaking up and it's saying, hey, there's some issues here. And there's been research for especially the last 20, 30 years, but really thousands of years of how the mind body is connected. There's a lot of research out there about different emotional drivers behind certain ailments, certain things. So you look at someone and you say, oh, well, what's going on? Why is this person having this? Well, there could be predispositions to physical things due to either their own or their parents or ancestral emotional drivers. And so anyways, our body is just for us, and it's trying to speak up to say, hey, there's some problems, deal with it. If we don't listen, then our body starts to get louder and louder. And that's why people become chronically ill, because there's something there, and not for the reason that we don't want to listen, but we don't understand as a society. Why are we getting sicker? I think we're getting worse and worse at being in our body and understanding what's going on, and even dealing with trauma, dealing with our past. We're such copers. And so your body's just speaking up louder and louder and louder until finally we listen. And once we listen, which is what Heather did, once we actually say, oh, you're trying to communicate to me, then the body's like, oh, thanks for listening. And then when you deal with that trauma, the symptoms begin to fade away. Yeah. Literally, I mean, they just do. No matter how many clients we've worked with, it's we'll work on some things, and yeah, maybe some symptoms, but really we're working on the drivers, the root system that's going on, the reason behind it up here, rewire this stuff. And then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, like I can sleep again. It's weird. I don't do insomnia, or I don't have migraines. Like since I rewired that, I don't know. Your body says, oh, I don't need to do that anymore.
Where I'm not supposed to have any range of motion in my neck because my spine is fused.
Right. She can totally, whatever.
It defies
people who couldn't get pregnant. All of a sudden, like, oh, it's safe to be pregnant because you've dealt with this, and this. Boom, you got a baby now.
It's so true what you're saying about the signs that your body is telling you. I was telling you my story before we started recording, and I started to get something in my early 20s, and I would go and see a doctor and they would tell me it's fine. And so I was like, oh, it's fine. So I'll just keep going, repeating all the mistakes. And it was only until I got slapped in the face like 6 years later, and, the symptoms are 24/7, that I had to like pay attention to it. So I completely agree with everything you're saying. Do you, in terms of the clients you work with now, what would you say is like the biggest blocker you come across when you're dealing with people, for them actually recovering and getting better?
That is such a good question.
2 words. What we call secondary gains is usually the main thing you got to dig out. I'll let you share if you want.
So when we start to operate from the belief that our body's for us, and that this communication that's coming out as pain or sickness or illness and everything isn't actually against us, then we start to be able to see the very good reasons. We can listen to the very good reasons it's being sick, right? It's doing these illnesses. So for instance, for me, my mom was a drug addict. My mom still actually is a drug addict, but and I had such a complicated relationship with her, and I was deeply enmeshed with her. And so there was that thing. So here I go, where my symptoms exasperated huge after I couldn't not listen anymore after I had children. But here's the subconscious thing. My mind was saying, you do not want to repeat what happened with your mom, but also you have no skills to do it any other way. Right. And it's subconscious mind. It doesn't judge. It doesn't do like, yeah, but this and but that. It's just like, search the brain. Nope. How are you going to do this? You're just going to repeat this. So evolutionary wise, my body's going, no, don't pass this stuff down.
Yeah.
And so I have 2 little girls, mind you.
Well, had.
I mean, they're not little anymore, but my mind was like, no, you can't do this. You're going to do the same thing over again. And you know that that's not okay. So how about we get sick and die about it? So there was this secondary gain of like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a parent. I wouldn't have said that consciously. I'd been like, I can figure it out. I'm so much different than my family. The secondary gain of my disease was, guess what? I couldn't care for my children. Couldn't. But I couldn't be blamed for it. It was my fault. I was going to abandon them just like my mom abandoned me, but it wasn't going to be my fault.
And it wasn't going to be, the same way or whatever.
It wasn't going to be the same way.
And for different people, there's different secondary gains. I mean, even the idea of what did she want? She wanted someone in her whole life. Can someone please just take care of me? Because she had been taking care of everybody. So here I am stepping in, right? Taking care. And if she's sick, I'm going to continue as her partner to take care of her and to give her a need and all of it. So with chronically ill people, many times the things that we're working with clients is what benefits are there in staying sick? Now, logically, it's like, I don't want to be sick. I feel terrible all the time. And this is why I'm coming to you. Logically, it makes sense. The subconscious doesn't think logically. It thinks safety. What is the most safe thing? And how can I stay in alignment with what I already know? And so there's a lot of benefit. Like, and it's hard sometimes for people at the beginning to get into this, very difficult. They're like, there's no good reason why I'm sick. But then you start getting into it and you're like, oh, I don't have to work if I'm sick. Oh, I don't have to, if I don't make good choices, there's a good excuse. If I, there's all these different reasons.
I can stay in my house. Like I can't go out and hang out with people. And secretly the mind's going good because people suck. Like people are mean and we don't know how to, like, so it's like, I have to be this way, but there's always, here's what I can tell you, if whether anyone believes it or not, it just is. You will not do anything in your body if there's not a benefit somewhere in your mind. It won't happen. It's keeping you safe somehow.
Even the terrible things that we do that we're like, oh, I can't believe I did this. There's nothing good about it. There is something. There's some benefit to it.
Yeah.
You guys must get a lot of, it's quite, in a good way, it's quite triggering what you guys are saying. And I feel like you must come up against a lot of resistance, and people they need to be at the right point, don't they? Before they can actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. Because I hear it and I'm like, oh, I know there's going to be people not ready to hear it like that yet.
But there are people that are in that space of they're hopeful. Like they've gone over the hill, right? Of like, I'm never going to change. Nothing's ever going to wait. There's hope and they're looking for it. And when you're looking for it, you will find it.
Yeah.
I talk about it in my book. It's the biggest piece of this is where we move from the victim to the victor mindset.
Yeah.
And also where we stop doing blame and fault. Wait, so you're saying it's my fault that I'm sick?
Nope.
No. We don't do fault. We don't do judgment. Anytime you're faulting or you're judging or you're blaming, now you've got reason to stay where you're at.
Yeah.
We don't do that. We shift it into power. We shift it into responsibility. And that changes everything.
So with it, just going back into your, like, with all the multiple diagnoses, diseases you had going on, which must have been, that's trauma that I imagine you had to undo yourself anyway. The amount of times in your story I heard, they told me, it wasn't possible for me to get better, or, a lot of trauma just by hearing the words that you were hearing all of the time. You had all of these things going on. When you had this shift, was it a case of then, okay, my body now can actually take care of all this stuff? It has the ability physically to do that because you've had that mindset shift. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I just learned, it sounds simple, but I learned to listen and to stop seeing symptoms as bad. Right. And honestly, that shifts it. I was like, oh, it's communication. It's communication. It's communication. And now I've learned through so I started with Louise Hay, where I was like, okay, if this hurts, what does it mean? Because I did not know how to do emotion. Even emotion, like I couldn't have said, I feel sad. It was, I did mad or I did okay. But those were my two emotions. But so my body was what was speaking out emotion for me. So I learned to become an interpreter, and it takes the personalization out of it. So started out with Louise Hay, then went to Ines Segal. Then now if we're fast forwarding to my practice, I have a huge database of, you tell me what's going on with you. I can serve as a translator for your body. I can tell you where that's coming from. And then when we stop hearing the messages as drama, trauma, bad, we listen. When we start to listen, the body's like a small child where they're like, freaking out, tantrum, because that's the language in which it speaks. But when you go, hey, it's okay, talk to me. You get right down on that. You're like, just tell me, I'm here. I'm listening, tell me. Then the body goes, oh, okay, this is what's really going on. And you're like, okay, listen, I've got this. We've got this. We're here. It stops screaming. I know it sounds simple, but I'm proof of it. And thousands of clients around the world are proof of it at this point.
Are there any conditions you feel can't be worked with this kind of method that you've come across?
We haven't had any yet.
Really?
Not a one. Wow. I'm telling you, stuff that has been
crazy stuff
that shouldn't, genetic stuff, but epigenetics blew that out of the water, saying like, oh, stuff gets passed down, but it's not hardwired. We can change our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could tell you stories, client stories. People wouldn't believe them. If they're not ready, they're not going to believe them.
Yeah.
But we have so many amazing client stories of things that we're told, this can't be changed. This can't happen. I mean, I have many of those stories in my own body, but those, the stuff that wasn't supposed to be healable or, but we've tons of clients that are.
Yeah. I mean, on top of all the physical stuff, I mean, we're talking from eyesight to, tinnitus to joints to, I mean, anything. I mean, people that have literally had surgery and they're taking their thyroid out and now growing back their I mean, there's so many different things that we're capable of, right? But I'd say even more than like, okay, clients are now well physically, there's a huge, massive shift in their life dream, in their life view, in their life in general, because they're free from all the emotional trauma that's been going on that most of the time is just kind of shoved down. And so emotionally, relationally, career, like all these things have shifted and changed. I mean, this isn't really what this podcast is, but for me and being the partner here, actually, is it okay if I share kind of the relationship and what happened with us?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. So you would think I'm with this my wife for 10 years and all the chronic stuff, and now she's well, right? And you think like, oh my goodness, this is amazing, and now we're just gonna fly together. And actually what happened is I was the savior, the protector, the supporter, the provider, the whatever. She gets well. And in our relationship, I'm like, it's okay, life's good. We're taking care of things, taking care of finances. We've spent, as you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, I mean, all these things out of pocket. And it's like, she's well. Oh my goodness. Let's go do life together with our family. I started going down a spiral, like emotionally. I didn't grow up with the bipolar, depressive, all that stuff. But I'll tell you what, I didn't know what that was exactly, but I definitely was experiencing and doing depressive behaviors, feelings, thoughts, all these different things. It was like the more well she got, the more depressed and sad and like purposeless I started to feel. And because again, what was my purpose? My purpose in life became taking care of her. And I don't need to do that. Do I even have a purpose now? Like what's my role in our relationship? What's my role in life? And so it really, for a good year, really took me down. All right. She's like, more than that.
It was longer.
It really, when she really got well, it took me, I'd say a good 2 years. I was like, oh, that's great. Good for you. But I'm good. I mean, I didn't have a traumatic past. In my family, my parents are together. My family's pretty, together and all these different things. And I didn't realize how much I had suppressed in my childhood and throughout my years and all of the coping skills that I had, that I wasn't manifesting sick physically, but I was sure manifesting sick emotionally and mentally, and so good at coping that I didn't recognize it. So when she started getting well, that shifted her world, but because we're married and because we're connected, that shifted my world. And unfortunately, it took me a couple of years to really say, okay, maybe there's a problem. Maybe I have some things I could work on. I felt like I'm fine. And I wasn't. And so much damage had actually been done. Yeah, physically, there was a lot of damage there, but emotionally, there had been a lot of damage here and then here. And so it took me a couple of years to really say, okay, let me look into this for myself. Let me go in and look into my own brain, into my own stuff. And long story short, it's been a massive journey for me. I would say for her, it was like this, I'm well, and she's started getting better. For me, it was like, I'm starting to see that I'm getting a little bit well mentally. Like it really took years and years of going through my stuff, digging through so that relationally we could be sound. And so I say that because when we work with clients, obviously we work with people that have chronic illness and all these different things, but there's so many other people that don't do chronic illness, but it's going to come out in some way. If our body is not, now some people are just, they're kinesthetically, that's how they speak. That's how they emote. Other people, it's going to come out in their relationships. It's going to come out in their work. It's going to come out in some way, some form or fashion. And that's what it was for me. And that's what it is for a lot of people. But even people that are doing chronic illness, once that stuff gets sifted and pulled out and rewired, all of a sudden, because we're not just dealing with the symptoms, because we're not saying, oh, here, your symptoms better. We're dealing with all the emotional side of it. Actually, their entire life becomes lit up. Their relationships change. The way they think about their past, the way they think about their present, the way they think about their future entirely shifts in a totally different and better trajectory of life because they've dealt with the stuff that was always up here and there was nothing wrong with them. Their brain was actually wired in such a way to keep them safe, but you rewire it and it helps their body and their brain and their emotions all realize, oh, I am safe. Like, it's okay. And now I can live my dream.
Yeah, definitely. So much what you said there, like completely resonate, with everything that I've been thinking about in the last couple of years. I think actually, if you try to assess it, people who get chronic illness are actually quite lucky in a way to get something like that at that stage in their life, because I'm now young enough that, if my dad got something like this, like he's in his 70s now, like he's so set in his ways, for him to open up his mind now and try and sort that out at his age is so difficult. Whereas I'm getting the opportunity to do this at such a younger age now. And it's not just about my physical stuff anymore. It's about that I want to have such a rich life after that. And I want to have an amazing life after. And that's why I was going to ask you, Kent, like in terms of, and you've already answered it, but like in terms of for yourself, the learnings that, that Heather's been through, like how much would that impact you, not just like physically, but mentally? And it sounds like for both of you, separately and together, you're able to, aside from chronic illness, you're just living a purposeful, amazing life. And you feel that that's actually possible for everyone.
100%. It's absolutely possible for everyone. And I'll even add, it's possible for anyone at any age. It really, really is, because the way that our brain works is that the subconscious doesn't know, it's very linear. It doesn't know past, present, and future. And so when we actually go in and you can think about something in your past that bothers you, your body says, your brain says it's happening now. And so someone who's 60, 70 years old, even though it may be way in their past, when they rewire their stuff, back then, it actually rewires it now as well. And so that freedom, that love, that forgiveness, that whatever needs to be there can come. And it's absolutely happened with the two of us. And I'm really, really grateful that I'm grateful that my wife was able to have that shift and be able to really heal, because it opened up things that I didn't know I needed healing from. Interestingly enough, the body is kind of like, again, that first line of defense in one sense of it's saying, hey, there's something going on. I realize now, even though I was healthy growing up my whole life and all these different things, I realized I almost in one sense was so filtered that I bypassed the body speaking up, and emotionally, I was just cut off. Yeah. And as I started working through my emotions, my stuff, my past, all of a sudden, it was like my body was able to say, hey, here's something. So I'd get like cracks my neck or get bronchitis or whatever was there. And it was like, oh, my body's starting to speak up. And so her body was very loud. My body was like, I didn't recognize it. And once I started working through the things, I don't have to go to the extent of a relationship falling apart or of this falling apart. Now I can just listen to all different sorts of, whether it's my body or emotions or other things. And so, I'm really grateful.
What would be both of your advice to someone right now who's listening to this, who's in, maybe they don't have as many diagnoses as you did, Heather, but they're in the depths of of chronic illness, they can't see a way forward. They don't believe in their own salvation, their own recovery. But they're still listening to this because they need some kind of hope. What would be your advice to this person, like, in order for them to keep moving forward?
Well, I think I would just say, man, when I talk about my stuff, it feels like I'm talking about somebody else. Honestly, sometimes it feels like I'm telling stories, which I love. I never thought that would be me. I always was so intimately involved in feeling as poorly as I was feeling. So I would just say, what if? Just even give yourself the what if. Just what if? Because if there's even, and a lot of people don't do that because they're so afraid to be let down. Mm-hmm. And that's a secondary gain, right? Well, if I don't think about this, then I can't be disappointed. I would say, listen, you're already disappointed, right? Nobody wants their life to have turned out this way. So what if you could? What if it looked even a little better? What if you were worth it? What if? Instead, we use our imagination all the time for catastrophic things. And what if it gets worse? And what if I get this symptom? And especially in the community of chronic illness, we obviously often hear other people and how bad they are. And we learn how to do our illness even better. I would say just the what if you could improve? What if you are worth it? What if there was a way? What if? And you may not be able to consciously think that that's the case, but you're still taking whatever pill you're taking, probably. You're still going to your doctor's appointments. Somewhere inside, and it may be a still small voice. It might just be this tiny, tiny, tiny little voice that you want to get well somewhere inside. Mm-hmm. And what if you just need the tools? What if that's it? What if you could just find that? So just that, utilize your imagination a little bit. And what if you are worth being one of those people who does have the success story? What if you could be that person? And then the brain goes, but these are all the reasons that you can't. Go, oh, look, there's proof. What if I could deal with that proof and change that proof? Then my outcome would probably change. Just a tiny bit of awareness. You have a very good reason for doing everything that you're doing. Very good. But what if you could have a better reason for doing it differently? There is hope.
That's like the opposite of worrying. I like it, because worrying is like, oh, what if this happens? And I've never thought about that. Like, actually, why don't I think about what if the opposite of that happened? That's an amazing way to think about it. If people wanted to connect with you guys, work with you, or could you just give us some detail on that? How would they best go and do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So clearly, we work with clients one-to-one, right? We have our private practice in that sense. But there's actually a number of other ways. The reason my wife even wrote Mind Change back in 2019 was because there's two of us, right? And not only there's only two of us to go around right now, but we very much believe that people have the power within. That it's not Heather and I changing people. It's not what we're doing, although we do see ourselves as facilitators, coaches, mentors, helping people sometimes walk through the hard stuff. But we totally believe, with all of our clients, we believe, hey, we're here for you for a time, but you have what it takes. So one of the reasons that she wrote the book is to help people realize, oh my goodness, I can do this. I have the creative power to change my mind. So there's that, obviously the book, but then we've also just released an online course. And this really dives deep into how the mind works and how to work on yourself. And so some people are like, okay, well, I can't do the private sessions or whatever, but oh my goodness, I can walk through this myself and utilize this course to work on myself. There's that. Obviously we have retreats, we do private retreats, we do a group retreat coming up next year. Here in Maui. So there's a lot of different ways that people can reach out. Mindchange.com is the website. And so all the information's on there.
Yeah. For full transparency, we for one-to-one sessions, I think I'm booking into March right now.
Yeah.
But we did not get into this for that. Like, I want everyone to have access to this because it's everyone's own power. So we can't monetize that. We just can't. It's a terrible business model, but it's really what we believe. We don't keep clients long-term because they get well and they go out and they live their life. I love that. The one-to-one sessions, I totally get. And had I heard this, I'd be like, I want to work with you. They are not easy to come by. So, but we want people to be able to have access to this. We are training other people, so that's one of the things we're doing. We do have some other practitioners within our system who are amazing and can take clients as well. But for right now, the online course, the book, I would say the book, it's on Audible. There's ebooks. There's a workbook. Workbook. I get emails all the time. Like, this changed my life. This helped me with my chronic illness. This helped me with this. I've never been able to deal with this. And now it's gone. With just reading the book, everything's there. Everything is there. We're not trying to like hold stuff back and nothing. It's all there. So read the book. If you need extra help, take the course. If you need extra help, that there are people who can help. And the retreats, we do in these intensive retreats, and people.
Oh man, we just did one. Life transformed.
Everyone comes away from these just like, my entire life is different. And we have so many testimonials, but I will tell you, we're not super great about getting them out there, but check there. We do have some, we have so many, it's just hard to get them all out there. But so there are ways to do that, but I do want to let people know when they're like, I went on your website and there's nothing there. I know we're trying to, spread out. We started a nonprofit because we do want to make this accessible. We've got first responders that we want to get trained in this stuff. We want to get it out to as many people as possible. So we've got a nonprofit. We've already gotten some donations. We want to start. Our idea would to get this out to as many people for no cost as possible. Like, that would be ideal, that people could get worked with, and we could do research to show, get the grants, show the research, show people why this works and how it works, and get it out there for as many people as possible. But that's where we're at right now. So.
Awesome. And thanks so much for coming on and both of you sharing your stories. You guys are doing such important things. Like, even just speaking to you for this hour has had an impact on me. So I know it's going to have a huge impact for people listening to this. So keep doing what you're doing and grow it as much as you physically can, because I think so many people need what you guys are doing. So thank you for doing that, but also thank you for coming on and sharing your amazing story.
Absolutely.
Thanks
for having us.
Thanks for what you're doing too. I love the comeback.
Yeah. I mean, that you are giving people the hope, like people who are listening right now, people are listening to all your podcasts. Those are the people that you're attracting, the people that are looking for hope, and you're giving it to them. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.